I'm going to be meeting with everybody, but I'm very happy to meet with him, and indeed I'm meeting with Orbex later on today, because it's a really important point that the launch sector is somewhere where we have a very specific geographical advantage and in terms of skills that we need to exploit to our best advantage for the whole of the UK economy. It's not just about what happens on Shetland, it's about lots of businesses as part of the supply chain, through from mission control to technological support. So yes, I'm very happy to meet with him.
Mike Reader.
Great, Mr Speaker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Keeping children safe online is the priority for this government. The Online Safety Act places strict safety duties on online platforms such as Roblox to protect children from being groomed by online predators. Ofcom is the regulator for the regime, and they will set out steps in the codes for the platforms to take to fulfil their duties by the end of this year.
Mike Reader.
Mr Speaker, one of my constituents is a volunteer moderating the Roblox platform. His group have identified and had banned over 14,000 accounts involved in child grooming, exploitation and sharing indecent images. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that whilst we drive for tech innovation and investment, we must keep online safety at the heart of our strategy?
I'm grateful for his question, and I extend my deepest sympathies to those who have been affected by the crimes that he has outlined here. The Online Safety Act and the measures that will be coming to force soon are there to directly impact that concern. I want those powers to be used as assertively as is possible. I've heard just today about another story affecting Roblox. I expect that company to do better to protect the service users, particularly children, on its website.
I am Khan. Melanie Ward.
Question number 2, Mr Speaker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. At the International Investment Summit on Monday, some of the world's biggest science and tech firms committed to invest billions of pounds in Britain, growing our economy and creating new jobs across our country. In Rome last week, I launched the UK's first online safety agreement with the United States. By working with our closest partners, home to the world's biggest tech companies, we will create a safer online world for our children. Finally, I'd like to congratulate, on behalf of the whole House, Sir Demis Hassabis and Geoffrey Hinton for the Nobel Prizes for which they were won last week. Their extraordinary achievements are testament to the phenomenal level of AI talent that is fostered in Britain today.
Melanie Ward.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. There are numerous examples of the damage that out-of-control social media and mobile phones are doing to our young people, including in my area of Fife. The Courier newspaper has played an important role in highlighting these. Does the Secretary of State recognise the concerns that the Safer Phones Bill, presented today by my honourable friend, the member for Whitehaven and Workington, and backed by many across this House, seeks to address?
I'm grateful for the question, and also pay tribute to the Courier newspaper in her area for exposing some of these issues. We must keep children safe and vulnerable people safe when they're online. It is my intention to make sure that safety is baked in from the outset. When it comes to keeping children safe in this country, everything is on the table, and I am open-minded as to how we move forward in order to achieve a much safer environment. Companies releasing products into our society should see it as a privilege, not a right. I have high expectations on behalf of this country to make sure that safety is baked in from the start.
Secretary Andrew Griffith.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Did the Secretary of State fully disclose to the Civil Service Commission the labour links of one of the most senior civil service appointments, or the £66,000 donation he received?
Every donation that was made to this party in opposition has been declared in the appropriate ways, but I'm proud to be part of a party that raises standards in public life rather than votes to lower them. And, Mr Speaker, I'm also proud to be part of a party that comes into government and attracts talent to working for it, whereas when they see talent, they libel it.
Well, Mr Speaker, thanks to Whitehall Watch, we have a copy of the form. It's clear that the Secretary of State failed to mention the conflict of interest as required by the Ministerial Code. In the words of the Prime Minister's favourite pop star, some would say he's guilty as sin. Will he refer himself to the advisor on standards, or do we have to wait for the Prime Minister to finish organising VIP motorcades and do it for him?
There we have it. We have a party that attacks civil servants who are gravitating, the world's greatest talent, coming to this party with this government to work for it. When he sees talent in government, he libels it and saddles the taxpayer with the bill. This government attracts talent, and I'm proud of it.
Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The first Farnborough International Space Show will take place in my constituency in March next year. With space agencies from across the world already signed up to attend, the show will allow the UK to stand on the world stage and showcase our position as a convener of global innovation. Will the Secretary of State and the UK Space Agency pledge their support to this show? And can I invite him to join me at this inaugural event?
Farnborough has done an astonishing job at getting British aviation into the global news. This is something I've supported. My dad served in the Fleet Air Arm back in the 1960s, and I went with him many times to Farnborough to see the planes he worked on up there in the sky. The fact that Farnborough is now moving into space is something that we should celebrate as a country and as a house. Of course, I am very grateful for what they're doing, and of course I will be there to participate in the event in any way that is meaningful when it comes around. Thank you.
Rebecca Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. BD UK has recently classified Devon, including rural areas like Dartmoor National Park, as a Type C procurement under Project Gigabit. However, there are concerns about how agile and timely its delivery will be. Will the Minister agree to meet with me to discuss the speedy rollout of broadband in Dartmoor National Park?
Yeah.
It seems I've never been... Thank you. It seems I've never been so popular. Of course, I'm very happy to meet with her. It's a very serious point that we want every single part of this country to share in the digital future. We can only do that if we have the infrastructure everywhere in the country that we need.
Samantha Niblett.
I know that my right honourable friend shares the delight that many of us felt when it was announced researchers from UK-based AI company Google DeepMind are to share a Nobel Prize for their work on protein folding, a technology that will help shape economies of the future. As founder of Labour Women in Tech, I want this technological growth to be diverse. So I ask both the government what it's doing to ensure that the UK remains a global leader in this tech space, and what it's doing to ensure that my constituents in South Derbyshire trust that this is technology can and will benefit everyone.
Can I thank my honourable friend for her question and for all the work that she does to encourage more women into tech. And it's great to know that the tech world isn't just full of tech bros, but there are quite a lot of tech sisters as well. We are committed to building upon UK's success as a global AI leader, and the upcoming AI action plan demonstrates this commitment to foster the trust and ensure safe development of AI models by introducing binding regulation on a handful of companies developing the most powerful AI systems, fostering trust in these technologies. We will also will continue to be...
We are now moving to Prime Minister's questions. Dr. Danny Chambers.
Number one, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Alex Salmond was a monumental figure in Scottish and UK politics. He leaves a lasting legacy, and I know that the deepest condolences of the whole House are with Moira, his family and his loved ones. Mr. Speaker, this week we also remember our colleague and friend, Sir David Amess, whose kindness and commitment to public service continues to inspire us all. And I know how deeply this was felt on the benches opposite, and I'm so glad that his plaque is here in the House with us. I also want to acknowledge the extraordinary life of Holocaust survivor Lily Ebert, whose message of hope showed such courage. May her memory be a blessing. Mr. Speaker, we also extend our sympathies to the family of General Sir Mike Jackson. He was an inspirational leader of the British Army and served with distinction. Mr. Speaker, I know the whole House will join me in wishing the best of luck to the new England manager, Thomas Tuchel. I won't hold his old job against him, but I wish him well in the new one. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others in addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Dr Danny Chambers.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In last week's maternity services debate, we heard of the devastating impact of the removal of consultant-led maternity services from a hospital. Now, under the previous government's unfunded new hospital programme, there were proposals to remove consultant-led maternity services from our hospital in Winchester. Could the Prime Minister reassure me and my constituents that under the new government that consultant-led maternity services and A&E services will remain in Winchester, and will he commit to funding properly the backlog of maintenance that has developed in our hospital in Winchester?
Yeah. Well, I thank him for raising this very important issue and for championing the voices of women in his constituency. We are committed to ensuring that all women and babies receive safe, compassionate and personalised care through pregnancy, birth and critical following months. Reconfiguration of the services, as he knows, is a matter for the integrated care boards, important as it allows decisions to be made locally and tailored to local interests. But all changes should be based on evidence, clinically led and involve engagement with patients to ensure they'll deliver better outcomes. It's a very important issue.
Alison.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Whitby Interactive has provided inclusive play schemes and holiday activities for children and young people with special educational needs and disabilities for 26 years. It has been a lifeline for families continually failed by Conservative governments. But Interactive is set to close due to a funding shortfall. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that action to tackle the crisis in SEND provision is urgently needed and that charities like Interactive deserve our support more than ever?
Yes, I do, and I know this will be a concerning time for families who rely on the brilliant work of Whitby Interactive. Children with special educational needs and disabilities have been failed for too long, and this comes up repeatedly in this House, with parents struggling to get their children the support that they need and that they deserve. We must raise the standards for every child so they can succeed in education. We will fix the foundations, Mr Speaker, and ensure every child can achieve their potential.
Leader of the Opposition, Rishi Sunak.
Can I join with the Prime Minister's words of tribute to Alex Salmond and the Holocaust survivor Lily Ebert, and thank him for his kind words about Sir David Amess. We remember him fondly, and we will be thinking of all their families at this moment. Mr Speaker, this week, China has carried out unwarranted, aggressive and intimidatory military exercises in the Taiwan Strait. Our allies are rightly concerned. After worrying reports that the government may have intervened to stop a visit to the UK by the former Taiwanese president, can the Prime Minister confirm that the Foreign Secretary will use his meetings in Beijing this week to condemn China's dangerous escalatory acts in the Strait?
I thank him for his question. The continued military activity in the Strait is not conducive to peace and stability in the Taiwan Straits is in all of our interest. On the wider point that he raises, we will cooperate where we can as permanent members of the UN Security Council, issues like net zero, health and trade, compete where we have different interests, but challenge, the point he makes is absolutely right, where it's needed, to protect national security, human rights and our values, and we will put that challenge in.
Mr Sunak.
Well, given what the Prime Minister said, and I agree, of course, we must engage, but we should use that engagement for our national interests. I hope that the Foreign Secretary will unequivocally condemn this military escalation and stand up for democracy in Taiwan. Now, the whole House will be concerned about the fate of the democracy campaigner Jimmy Lai. He is a British citizen who has been wrongly imprisoned in Hong Kong for 4 years. The previous government pressured China for his release. Does the Prime Minister agree that this is a politically motivated prosecution and that it is a breach of China's legal obligations to Hong Kong under the Sino-British Declaration?
Yes, and this case, as he will understand, is a priority for the government. We do call on the Hong Kong authorities to release immediately our British national, and the Foreign Secretary raised this case in his first meeting with China's foreign minister, and we will continue to do so.
Rishi Sunak.
I thank the Prime Minister for that answer. Now, China, as he knows, has become a decisive enabler of Russia's war against Ukraine, supplying the vast majority now of Russia's imported military microelectronics and components, worsening the suffering of the Ukrainian people. So can the Prime Minister confirm that he is prepared to sanction any Chinese business or individual involved in aiding Russia's invasion of Ukraine, including secondary sanctions on financial institutions?
Yes, and we've called for that in the past. We continue to do so, and I hope this is an issue where we can have unity across the House.
Rishi Sunak.
Yes, I can assure the Prime Minister of his support. It is something that we began. The United States recently have expanded their sanctions, and I hope that the new government will continue to look at doing the same. Now, the last government also established a new system of registration and monitoring to protect the UK from interference from foreign states, including China, Russia and Iran. Called the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme, it was described as essential by MI5 in the fight to help keep Britain safe. But since the Prime Minister took office, he has halted its implementation. Why?
That isn't correct.
Rishi Sunak.
Yeah, well, Mr. Speaker, that is very clearly what the government has said. And only last week he said at the dispatch box that he would give the security forces the powers they need. And if he is going to fulfil that promise, I would urge him to get up to speed on this issue and therefore implement the scheme. Furthermore, Parliament's Intelligence and Security Committee have warned that British universities are increasingly a rich feeding ground for China to exert political influence over us. That's why we passed the Freedom of Speech Act with new powers to help defend universities from this threat, but the new Education Secretary has since blocked it. So can the Prime Minister tell us how, without this tool, the government will prevent Chinese influence over our universities?
I really don't think party political points on security and intelligence. Throughout the last Parliament, we stood with the government on all questions of security and intelligence because it was important to the outside world that we did so. I worked with the security and intelligence services for 5 years prosecuting cases. I know firsthand the work that they do as a lawyer. I've known firsthand the work they do as the Prime Minister. We support them in everything that we do, and he knows that.
Mr. Speaker, whether it's the FIRS scheme or the Freedom of Speech Act, these were new tools, new sets of powers that the previous government passed in order to give, whether it's our universities or security services, the powers they need to tackle a growing threat. And we will, of course, continue to support the government in protecting our national security, but do believe on this side of the House that those tools are needed and are concerned by reports that the new government has paused their implementation or indeed scrapped them. But finally, Mr. Speaker, the Chinese government has sanctioned multiple members of our parliament for championing human rights. As a result, they have faced intimidation, abuse and surveillance. And Mr. Speaker, I commend you for your defence of the right of every member of this House to speak out on crucial issues without fear of retaliation from foreign states. Now, I know the Prime Minister will agree with that too. So this week, will the Foreign Secretary in his meetings not just raise the issue, but tell the Chinese government to lift those sanctions on our colleagues?
Yes, and we speak with one voice. He speaks about the record of the last government. That record was 14 years of failure. 6 years austerity, 3 years of Brexit logjam, then Johnson Trust and the Leader of the Opposition, utter failure. And this government was elected to do things differently, to make fairer choices, but most importantly, to give Britain its future back. So we will fix the foundations. We'll do it with a long-term plan to grow our economy, protect working people, and rebuild our country.
Jane Craft.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 2 years ago, Thurrock Council was led into effective bankruptcy by the then Conservative administration, in no small part due to an investment of hundreds of millions of pounds into a solar farm scheme run by a con man. Given the Prime Minister's commitment to integrity in public life, will he support mine and my constituents' calls for a public inquiry so that those responsible can finally be held to account?
I thank her for her question, because years of underfunding have left councils facing huge budget pressures. They yawn. They don't know the impact it has on working people up and down the country. They rely on public services, and what's happened in Thurrock is shocking. We are committed to resetting the relationship and helping those under intervention to recover and to reform. 14 years is a long time to destroy local services, and it's clear it'll take time to fix them. We will get councils back on their feet by providing multi-year funding settlements. But ultimately, we have to grow our economy, and I'm surprised the Prime Minister didn't welcome the £63 billion of investment that we were able to announce on Monday.
Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed David.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I echo the tributes of the Prime Minister to Alex Salmond, to Sir David Amess and to Lily Ebbott? And can I welcome the news that ministers are going to review the carers' allowance repayment scandal after campaigns by carers' organisations, the Guardian newspaper and the Liberal Democrats, culminating in our motion on the order paper today. But will he agree with me that the evidence needed for the review is already long established and many of the decisions self-evident? So will he and his colleagues vote for our motion today so we can write off the overpayments, we can end the crazy cliff edge to the earnings limit now and have a fuller review for the support that carers deserve?
I thank him for raising this. This is obviously a really important issue affecting a number of people, and that's why we've launched an independent review into the carers' allowance overpayments to look at the circumstances of the overpayments, to see what went wrong and therefore what can be done to put it right, because carers must get the support that they deserve. So I'm grateful for him for raising it. I'm glad that we've been able to take this action today to go forward on a really important issue.
David.
Can I thank the Prime Minister for that answer and ask him that ministers in the review will listen to the voices of carers throughout. Can I turn to the Middle East now? Israeli Finance Minister Smotrich had said that starving 2 million people in Gaza might be justified and moral. National Security Minister Ben-Gvir called settlers who killed a 19-year-old on the West Bank heroes. After my visit to Israel and Palestine last February, having witnessed the damage that these extremist ministers in the Netanyahu government are doing, I called on the last government to sanction them. The last government refused, but we now learn that the former Foreign Secretary was considering this. So will the Prime Minister now sanction Ministers Ben-Gvir and Smotrich?
We are looking at that because they're obviously abhorrent comments, as he rightly says, along with other really concerning activity in the West Bank, but also across the region. The humanitarian situation in Gaza is dire. The death toll has surpassed 42,000, and access to basic services is becoming much harder. And Israel must take all possible steps to avoid civilian casualties, to allow aid into Gaza in much greater volume, and provide the UN and humanitarian partners the ability to operate effectively. Mr Speaker, along with France, the UK will convene an urgent meeting of the UN Security Council to address this.
Lyndon.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It's been an honour to meet my constituent, Tom Morton, a young person in care who sat in the public gallery today and cares so deeply about politics and communities. Young people in care are at a disproportionate risk of criminal and cynical exploitation by drug barons through county lines. Will the Prime Minister tell Tom and the House what steps the government will take to prevent vulnerable children in care becoming involved in county line operations?
Well, can I welcome Tom to this House. It's encouraging to see young people engaging in democracy. County lines is a real problem, and all of us will have experienced the effect and impact of that in our constituencies. And our County Lines programme focuses on preventing young people being exploited and lured into criminal gangs, which is far too common, and committed to introduce a new offence of child criminal exploitation, long overdue. We will also create a network of young future hubs, staffed with professional youth workers, mental health support workers and career advisors to provide focused support for young people, helping them to fulfil their ambitions and preventing them being drawn into crime.
Savile Roberts.
Iawn Lefarydd, and Plaid Cymru too would like to pay tribute to Alex Salmond and Sir David Amess. Mr Speaker, 1 in 5 people in Wales is on an NHS waiting list. The Secretary of State for Wales says that a new cross-border NHS plan would bring down Welsh surgery waiting lists. But the First Minister of Wales, Labour, contradicts her. She denies it has anything to do with bringing down waiting lists. Are they making it up as they go along?
The difference is this: we now have a Westminster government that wants to work with the Welsh government to deliver for the people of Wales. For 14 long years, the Welsh government was in a position where the then government was in conflict with them. So now we will work together, collaborate, and ensure that together we deliver across Wales.
Chris MacDonald.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Will my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, join me in praising our Labour Police and Crime Commissioner for Cleveland, Matt Storey, who's working with me to tackle knife crime, drug crime and antisocial behaviour in Stockton North, and assure my constituents that under this Labour government we'll see more police officers in Stockton and Billingham.
Well, I welcome his work with the new Labour Police and Crime Commissioner. And it's sad to say that in Cleveland, full-time equivalent police officers fell by over 12% under the last government. When you fail on the economy and growth, those are the types of things that happen across the country. As part of our neighbourhood policing guarantee, we'll put 13,000 more neighbourhood police and PCSOs back on our streets and ensure every community has a named local officer. Through our Safer Streets mission, we will tackle illegal drugs, half-knife crime and crack down on antisocial behaviour and go after the gangs that lure young people into violence.
And Hawke.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. As evidenced by some earlier questions, issues surrounding SEND, local government finance and adult social care are issues which affect all of our constituents. And let's be honest, Mr Speaker, for too long, both parties have ducked and dodged taking the difficult but necessary decisions. In order to give certainty to our constituents and confidence to those who provide those vital services, does the Prime Minister share my assessment that there is considerable merit in formal cross-party working on these issues, where we can share taking those difficult decisions in order to improve outcomes for our constituents?
Well, I am grateful to him for raising this question about SEND, because it is a really important issue, and I think this is the 4th time in 2 Prime Minister's questions where it's been raised on both sides of the House. I quibble with his suggestion it's both parties, since his party was in power for 14 years. But the spirit in which he puts this forward, that this should be cross-party, is something that we should take up, because it's such an important issue. It affects so many children and parents, and therefore, notwithstanding the quibble, I'm very happy to work across the House on an issue as important as this.
Katrina Murray.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Fairways Networking Group, a group of small businesses in my constituency of Cumbernauld and Kirkintilloch, all operate on tight margins. Can my right honourable friend help me reassure this group that not only do they have nothing to fear from the Employment Rights Bill, but they have plenty to gain as exemplar employers?
Yes, the Employment Rights Bill is pro-worker and pro-growth, and proudly so. And I don't believe you can build a strong economy by having people in insecure work. The party opposite They go against every protection for workers. They're against the minimum wage. They're against these new protections. But the vast majority of businesses, large and small, already know that investing in your human capital, treating people properly at work, is what produces growth. So here's the big political divide. They always oppose workers' rights. We will always champion them.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and can I associate the Green Party with his tributes to Alex Salmond and Sir David Amess. 99.7% of new patients in the east of England are unable to find an NHS dentist, the worst affected area in the country. My constituents in Waveney Valley want urgent action. So when will the government begin the critical negotiations on dental contract reform so no one in the 21st century has to pull out their own teeth? And will it be by the end of this year?
Well, he raises a really important issue because dentistry was left in a shocking state by the last government. I was shocked to hear that for children's hospitals, the commonest cause for admission for 6 to 10-year-olds in our children's hospitals in this country is to have teeth taken out because of the failure of the last government. That is shocking on any analysis. We will put that right, we will take the necessary steps, and we'll work across the House to do this as quickly as possible.
Can Smith.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Last night in this House, we took the first steps in abolishing the hereditary principle of privilege. I was hosting the Let's End Poverty Coalition at a meeting upstairs where we heard that often for many who experience poverty, that feels hereditary too. So will the Prime Minister meet with me and those with lived experience of poverty to find ways in which we can hear from those with that lived experience to break that cycle of poverty?
She makes a good point. The party opposite, they want to get rid of maternity pay, but keep hereditary peers. It's the same old Tories. But, you know, the letters, this is an important issue that she's raised. The letters are honest, powerful and important. And I think they hold up a mirror to our country. We will deliver a budget that drives economic growth, improves the lives of working people, fixes our public services and rebuilds our country with a decade of national renewal.
Diolch Llefarydd. My constituent Jeanette Crawford suffers from ME and chronic pain. The cold, damp conditions of a Welsh winter are going to mean a lot more muscle soreness and fatigue for her. She's lost her winter fuel payments due to having a very small savings pot. With 86% of pensioners in poverty or just above that line to miss out in Wales, will the Prime Minister establish a social energy tariff to help people like Jeanette?
On this issue of winter fuel payments, we have inherited a £22 billion black card. They should be apologising, not groaning, for leaving the country in such a state. We are committed to the triple lock. The point about pensions is really important, and that means that the triple lock means that the pension will increase again by £460 next year, which means that pensioners under Labour will be better off because we're going to stabilise the economy after that lot lost control of it.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In Britain, the biggest killer of men under 50 is suicide. We have some of the worst paternity leave in Europe, and boys are 50% less likely than girls to pursue higher education. I know that my right honourable friend takes this very seriously, and his commitment on reducing suicide rates is very welcome. Can the Prime Minister update the House on this work, and does he agree with me that it is vital that we tackle these issues head-on because of the increasing alienation and mental health issues amongst young men?
I thank him for raising this vital issue. The statistics on male suicide are truly shocking. I went to an event just a few years ago here in this place where everyone in attendance was asked if they had lost someone to suicide, and I then reflected on my own experience, which was profound. As it was, I could see, for everybody across the room, and will be across this House. So reducing deaths from suicide is a vital part of our health mission. We're recruiting an additional 8,500 mental health workers, specially trained to support people at risk of suicide, to provide faster treatment and ease pressure on our services.
Thank
you, Mr Speaker. Group Captain Lizzie Nichol had an exemplary career with the RAF until she was forced to resign for refusing to implement illegal recruitment orders. Despite inquiry after inquiry vindicating Lizzie, on every count the RAF and MOD have failed to offer her fair compensation and those responsible have walked away. Shamefully, during the Purdah election period, in what I believe was an attempt to subvert ministerial oversight, she was offered a derisory £2,000 by officials. I have documents proving beyond doubt that the former Chief of the Air Staff lied to the then Defence Secretary about her case. The Prime Minister says he believes in righting wrongs, so will he meet with Lizzie and help ensure that those responsible do not just walk away and that Lizzie gets the justice that she so very much deserves?
I thank her for raising what is obviously a very important case, and she's right to do so. I'm not across the individual details of it, but it obviously does need to be looked into. So we will commit to look into it, and I will make sure that she gets a meeting with the relevant minister to lay out such details as she has and to get some answers as to our inquiries.
Jake Richards.
Mr Speaker, children's social care in this country is now in crisis. Vulnerable children are regularly placed hundreds of miles from home, often in unregulated and unsafe accommodation. Meanwhile, private companies are making record profits on the backs of struggling and desperate local authorities. Frankly, this is an issue, a national scandal, that doesn't get enough attention. Today, Mr Speaker, I'll be presenting my private member's bill, which will offer modest reform in this area. But will the Prime Minister reassure me and thousands of families across the country that it is a priority of his government to fix the social care crisis and our family courts?
Well, I thank him for raising this issue and being a champion on it. He is absolutely right about the appalling inheritance. 1 in 4 children in absolute poverty. That's a terrible inheritance. And too many vulnerable children in unregulated accommodation. Through our Children's Wellbeing Bill, we will put children and their wellbeing at the heart of education and social care systems. We'll also provide a home for all young care leavers to ensure that they're not homeless and remove the barriers to opportunity so every child can thrive in safe and loving homes.
Mr Speaker, during the election campaign, the now Prime Minister made a hell of a lot of promises, some of which I'm sure he will remember. Of particular importance to my constituents in Andover, North West Hampshire, was a promise made on the 18th of June during a campaign visit to Basingstoke, when he made an unequivocal, unconditional commitment to rebuild our local hospital. Mr Speaker, is this a promise on which we can rely?
Mr Speaker, firstly I'm grateful to him for raising this because it's obviously of huge importance to his constituents and his right to do so. We are reviewing, as he knows, the programme. The programme that the last government put in place for 40 new hospitals had a number of flaws. They weren't all hospitals, they weren't new, and they weren't funded, so we're reviewing it. But what I will say, but he's right to raise this, and I will make sure that he has a meeting with the relevant minister to discuss the particular development in his constituency. It will matter to his constituents who are listening to this, and it's important they know where the failure lay.
Mr Speaker, I welcome the government's historic investment in carbon capture and storage technology for Teesside and Merseyside. This week I've been at the sector's conference, and the feeling there is that this is a government delivering after years of delay. Will the Prime Minister recognise the unique potential that Teesside has for jobs, prosperity and economic growth into the future?
Yes, and Mr Speaker, you will have observed that on Monday we had a very successful investment summit, £63 billion coming into this country, jobs in every part of the UK, and a very clear message from business that they were prepared to invest now under this new Labour government. Part of that was £22 billion commitment to CCUS, creating the first clusters in the world, including, as he points out, in the various parts of the country. So we'll support these jobs, we'll support these investment, we will grow our economy and rebuild our country.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. North Cornwall is an amazing place to live and work, but a top-down approach from Westminster has failed us. Public services are chronically underfunded, young people forced to move away to pursue careers elsewhere, and affordable housing is a promise that's simply never kept. Will the Prime Minister meet with all 6 Cornish MPs to discuss devolution for Cornwall, with a Cornish Assembly that recognises our unique culture, language and national minority status, so we can finally unleash Cornwall's economic potential?
I'm grateful to member for raising this. I do believe in transferring power out of Westminster and into the hands of leaders who know their communities best. Those with skin in the game know what's best for their communities. We are already making steps in the South West by signing the devolution agreement for Devon and Torbay. Absolutely encourage local authorities to work with their neighbours to pursue deeper and wider devolution for their area, and I'll make sure that he has the meeting that he's asking for.
Final question, Blair MacDougall.
As the Prime Minister works for a ceasefire and the return of the hostages, he'll have the support of people across this House. The Prime Minister will have noted the comments from the White House calling for urgent action to deal with the humanitarian crisis in Gaza and for the Netanyahu government to increase access to aid and to the amount of aid getting through. I wonder, does the Prime Minister agree with the comments from the White House and can he tell us what representations he is making on this matter?
Yes, I do agree with those remarks, and we are constantly making representations on this with our partners. There is an urgent need, and has been now for a very long time, for more aid to get into Gaza. It's a desperate situation, and Israel must comply with its international humanitarian law obligations, and that is why we are convening a session of the UK Security, of the UN Security Council with others to address this issue.
Right, that completes Prime Minister's question. I'll just let the front benches clear a bit. All the best, Rachel.